light of infinite.
Last week we discussed the notion that exile is a state of disconnect and redemption is the rectification of that state. In Likkutei Sichot it's written that the true meaning of redemption is the attainment of a state of transcendence above the boundaries and limitations of this material world. It's essential to realize that the intent of this statement is not that the transcendent state should nullify the world and its limitations, but rather that there should be a fusion of the infinite and the finite, and that godliness is meant to be revealed in our physical world in a Mishkan, a dwelling for Hashem established in the lower realms. This week, as we read the end of Parashat Pekudei, which is also the end of Exodus, we read about the mikvah and its purifying, status-altering power. Bring Aharon and his sons to the entrance of the tent of meeting and immerse them in a mikvah. Clothe Aharon with the sacred garments, anoint him and sanctify him so that he may serve as a kohein, priest to me. Many are familiar with the mikvah, knowing the customs of married women's immersion as part of the laws of family purity, and of course as part of the process of those who convert to Judaism. In the instance of Aharon and his sons, the immersion was more of a change of status than a purification, an elevation from one state to another. We see in the case of conversion to Judaism, it's not a matter of uncleanliness or purification, but rather a change in status. As it's written, as soon as the convert immerses and emerges, he is like a born Jew in every way. The mikvah process in this sense is like a rebirth. As it's written in regards to the convert's status change and renewal, the mikvah is like re-entering the womb. As we read, the convert who embraces Judaism is like a newborn child. Outside of the status change, the mikvah process is used to restore a person to a state of ritual purity. As it's written, you shall not make your souls unclean. Just as the womb is the space devoid of tumah, uncleanliness or impurity, in which the baby cannot become impure in any way, the mikvah for men and women can also be looked at in this status change from tumah to tahor, clean or pure. The Talmud teaches that all the waters that flow through the world ultimately have their root in the rivers that flowed through the Garden of Eden. So our immersion in the flowing waters of the mikvah is a re-establishment of our connection with the Edenic state. One of the most beautiful places in Israel is Masada. 1800 plus years have passed since ancient Israel fought the Roman Empire, and the excavations and discoveries on the top of Masada have been fascinating since then. One in particular was finding two mikvahs. One likely was used for men and the other for women. The laws surrounding the building of a mikvah are very detailed, and so two experts were brought in, Rabbi David Munzberger and Rabbi Eliezer Alter. They were brought in only to find out that in over 1800 years, the construction and the importance of the mikvah for Jews around the world has not changed one bit. The ritual of purity through immersion in flowing water and the construction of a mikvah in each community is more important than even constructing a synagogue, since prayer can be done in a number of different locations, and it's less important to build than mikvah established in a community. It's said of those that are close to Hashem that they are like the tree planted by the water, and will be rewarded with fresh leaves and mayim chayim, living waters, or forever flowing water. Living water represents energy and health, and chiyut, life, for the soul. I love how Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan teaches about the water's power to nullify the ego. He writes, we can see this from the etymology of the word mayim, which is the Hebrew word for water. According to a number of authorities, it shares the same root as the word ma, meaning what. When a person immerses in water, he's nullifying his ego and asking, what am I? Ego is the essence of permanence, while water is the essence of impermanence. When a person is ready to replace their ego with a question, then they are also ready to be reborn with its answer. So when Moshe and Aaron declared, we are what, our sages comment that this was the greatest possible expression of self-nullification and subjugation to Hashem. When a person enters the mikvah, he subjugates his ego to Hashem in a similar manner. We can also see this when a person immerses himself in water. He places himself in an environment where he cannot live. Were he to remain submerged for more than a few moments, he would die from lack of air. He's literally placing himself in a state of non-existence and non-life. Breath is the very essence of life, and according to the Torah, a person who stops breathing is no longer considered among the living. So when a person submerges himself in the mikvah, he momentarily enters the realm of non-living, so that when he emerges, he is like one reborn. To some degree, this explains why a mikvah cannot be made in a vessel or a tub, but must be directly in the ground, because in a sense, the mikvah also represents a grave. When a person immerses, he is temporarily in a state of non-living. When he emerges, he is resurrected with a new status. The representation of the mikvah as both a womb and a grave is not a contradiction. Both are places of non-breathing and are endpoints of the cycle of life. What we have to realize is that beyond being infused with a godly soul, a spark of divine within us, what connects us all is water. Our bodies are mostly water, and the brain and heart in particular are composed of 73% water. We tend to mirror each other's inner belief systems, and so if we aren't watering ourselves and those around us in connectedness and positivity, then individually and collectively we can't grow. Continually giving yourself and others life force and learning to quell our ego is essential to being in a blissful and connected state. The opening scene of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind comes to mind when Jim Carrey is in a funk, plays hooky from work, and has a sudden urge to go to the water in Montauk in February when it's freezing. He's pulled there despite the weather for its grounding element. He starts to journal and then gets up talking to himself, and then in the corner of his eye he sees a woman walking, and we hear him thinking out loud, "If only I could meet someone new. I guess my chances of that happening are somewhat diminished, seeing that I'm incapable of making eye contact with a woman I don't know." We are seeing his deep craving for a connection, but even more fundamental than that connection is alignment with our self-contained and content being. As we know, but often don't take enough advantage of, nature tends to ground us. And being away from nature, back in the hustle mode, tends to take us away from connecting to our inner self, and instead has us focused outward towards goals beyond ourselves, constant distractions from going inwards and connecting to Hashem. A mix of so many things that we feel are important in society and what we think we need to accomplish in life to reach a certain status. The hardest, but certainly the most fulfilling accomplishment is reaching oneness, contentment, the feeling of being in love with self and the feeling of being one with the space of being in your own skin in the predicaments that you're in. What they call having it all together. Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach asks, "How do you know you mamish have it all together?" And then he answers, very simple, if you don't have it together, you give up when things fall apart. If you really have it together inside, there's no such thing as giving up. Carlebach goes on to teach that Moshe Rabbeinu brought down the man, giving us the Torah and really teaching us at the end of the book of redemption that if we don't have it together, we are in exile, we are still slaves. In this same Parashat, we are taught that by making a dwelling, sanctuary for Hashem in this world, the glory of the Lord fills the sanctuary. As we read, the clouds of Hashem were over the Mishkan, tabernacle, during the day, and fire was within it at night for all the families of Israel to see during their travel. We see the power of the four elements, water, fire, earth, air, and how grounding they are all to each of us. Being surrounded by water and waves washing over us reminds us not only of the beginning, being in the womb and sustained by it all, but being surrounded by the life-giving force that connects us all. It reminds us that we need to let go of all the little things that we have created and strip ourselves down to the foundational elements of ourselves and not all the traumas and experiences that have created layers of shells around our true self. It's the same with planting our feet into the countless specks of sand or being surrounded by the expanse of desert or mountains, reminiscent of Masada. Things that humble us, bring healthy perspective back into our being. Go to thelightofInfinite.com to read this Dvar in full, where I dive into the mystical and esoteric story with Rabbi Akiva and the Pardes, the orchard. I'll end on this verse that I love from Malachi. Return to me, and I will return to you. Shabbat Shalom.